Welcome to our 10th lecture on riparian function and management. Our previous lesson covered some of the key considerations in understanding the riparian plant community. The considerations we discussed help answer the key questions: are the right plants present, and are they healthy? Stemming from that, we discussed plant cover, expanding colonies, stabilizing roots, large wood, vigor, species diversity, age diversity, and wetland indicator status. In this lesson, we'll begin training our eyes to see the riparian areas for their function. With an eye for function, it becomes easier to recognize poor health and to identify the activities that may be hindering riparian recovery. The riparian bullseye, an evaluation tool, uses 10 key indicators to plot health on a target. Learning to see in this way can help to inform decision-making in the favor of riparian function and all the values that it can deliver. These three areas are functioning quite well. In this last picture, don't be misled. The site is highly functional. The banks are fortified with roots and anchored with very large wood or large wood. Signs indicate the floodplain is accessed regularly and that it contains plenty of energy dissipation. Oppositely, these three dysfunctional riparian areas can be evaluated by observing the vegetation present, or lack thereof. A hindrance is any activity or situation that interferes with natural riparian recovery and a healthy function, usually the result of human or animal activity. Hindrances can be identified through close observation of the riparian vegetation. The following are common hindrances observed in Texas riparian areas: farming, mowing, or spraying weeds or brush too close to the bank, logging and related timber harvest activities adjacent to the creek, manicured or altered residential or park landscapes next to the creek, prolonged grazing concentrations in creek areas, excessive population of deer exotics or feral hogs in creek areas, burning in riparian areas, removal of large dead wood and downed trees, artificial manipulation of banks, channels, or sediment such as bulldozing, physical alteration of floodplains, excessive vehicle traffic in creek areas, excessive recreational activity or foot traffic in creek areas, excessive alluvial pumping or other withdrawals, in some cases the excessive growth of invasive species that inhibit the ability of natural riparian plants to do their jobs, low water dams and large reservoirs, and poorly designed road crossings and bridges. Using the riparian bullseye evaluation found in the back of your remarkable riparian field guide, you can develop your eyes to see riparian areas for their function, and you can identify activities that may be hindering the natural riparian recovery process. Can you see these? Can you see the active floodplain, the energy dissipation, new plant colonization, stabilizing vegetation, age diversity? Can you see species diversity, plant vigor, water storage, bank and channel erosion, or sediment deposition? Consistent notation of your observations with this guide, combined with photo point images collected over time, are key to monitoring riparian health. Not all of the parameters will be appropriate for all channel types. Leaving some portions of the target blank will not detract from your evaluation. Most of the 10 parameters will not apply to ephemeral streams, and likewise, some of the indicators will be difficult to evaluate on tidal-influenced segments of coastal streams. The bullseye area in the center of the target represents optimal function. The middle ring of the target represents an at-risk condition, a kind of riparian health danger zone. and the outermost ring of the target represents dysfunction. To register your observations, you need to fill in the dots for the appropriate zone of each of the 10 indicators. Again, the inner zone, or the bullseye area in the center of the target, represents optimal function. The middle represents an at-risk condition and a kind of riparian health danger zone, and the outer ring of the target represents dysfunction. One of the first and foremost considerations is floodplain access. Does floodwater have access to a floodplain? Why is this important? It's important because access to a floodplain is essential in order to give floodwater a place to spread out and slow down. Floodplains allow floodwaters to slow down and deposit their sediment, a necessary component of water storage in riparian areas. Organic matter, contained in most flood sediment, is known to increase the water-holding capacity of soils, sands, and gravels. Riparian areas can support stream flows during dry times by releasing stored water. So how can you see it? To evaluate if a stream has access in its floodplain, look for debris or silted deposits from a recent flood event. You will likely notice that where vegetation is thick in the floodplain, new sediment such as sand, fine gravels, or flood mud have been trapped. Look closely at that sediment and you may find pieces of leaves, tree bark, seed holes, and other tiny bits of organic matter. To identify those would be ideal. You would hit the bullseye. For active floodplains, is there new plant colonization? This is important because if floodwaters are being slowed down and sediment trapped, then those sediments need to be colonized by new... I totally misread. Pause. Okay, resuming with appropriate slide. Active floodplains. When streams are downcut, or if they are confined by roads or cement embankments, or if they are downcut and lack access to a floodplain, it is very difficult for them to heal, and other problems will ensue. For energy dissipation, ask yourself, is there enough present? This is important because floodwaters carry a lot of energy. If enough vegetation, rocks, or large dead wood are present, then floodwaters will be slowed down and their energy will be dissipated or spread out across the rough surfaces of these items. Slowing water down and dissipating energy is essential for healthy functioning riparian systems. So how can you see it? Just look for an unkept array of natural stuff. If the riparian area is open and park-like, then it's probably lacking in energy dissipation. For new plant colonization, is there enough of it? This is important because if floodwaters are being slowed down and sediment trapped, then those sediments need to be colonized by new plants in order to become stabilized and incorporated into the floodplain. This eventually will add to the water storage capacity. To see this, look for new young plants or runners from existing plants growing on newly deposited sediment. This may be most apparent on a point bar where new sediment may have been dropped at the edge of the channel. Plants that are good at this are called colonizers. While they may lack strong stabilizing roots, they are able to grow quickly and create conditions for other stronger plants to follow. Here on the barren area above, the barren area pictured, new plants have not visually begun to colonize. Is there stabilizing vegetation? This could be herbaceous and it could be woody, or it could be a mix. And why is this important? It takes strong-rooted vegetation to withstand the energy of floodwater. Plants are rated for their ability to withstand floods with a stability rating or SR number. As you recall, SR1 is bare ground and SR10 would be equivalent to the strength of an anchored rock. Good coverage with plants having SR ratings of 6 or higher is usually a minimum for weathering floods. When deep-rooted plants and high-stability plants are mixed with low-stability plants or large wood and boulders, the community stability is greatly enhanced as roots are often interlocked and incorporated with the wood and rock material. So how can you see it? Using your field guide, identify riparian plants and look up their stability ratings. You want to see good coverage on the riparian landscape of plants with an average of SR 6 or 7 or greater, along with the presence of large wood and boulders. When stabilizing vegetation is sparse or absent, then the site is clearly missing the bullseye. Are there plants of a variety of ages present? Why is this important? Well, age diversity of riparian plants is an indicator of health. Plants of different ages can help provide stability during fluctuations in flow and climatic conditions. The presence of both young and old palatable plants can indicate that past and present grazing and browsing have not hindered function. How can you see it? Identify riparian plants using the field guide. Look for young and middle-aged as well as older mature examples. The image here shows age diversity as well as a lack of diversity. It does also in this image. Can you see it? Are there a number of different important riparian species present? Pictured here, you can see eastern gamagrass, Indian grass, bulrush, cattail, spikerush, and cottonwood. In this next photo, you can see bald cypress, Mexican ash, cedar elm, pecan, red mulberry, box elder maple, and roughleaf dogwood. Why is this important? In nature, diversity contributes to system stability and resilience. This is also true in riparian systems where the diversity of riparian plant species can help lead to better functional conditions. A diverse group of riparian plants creates a plant community that is more durable and functional than any single species could be on its own. This is especially important underground where an interlaced series of diverse roots can interlock to hold channels in place, even elevating them to create more water storage across the entire valley. So how can you see it? Identify riparian plants using your field guide. Look closely for a group of high-stability native plants that can indicate a functional plant community. You may find only grasses and sedges or only woody riparian plants or some of both, but the important thing is to look for diversity within the groups. There is little plant diversity here. This riparian area is dominated by bald cypress and obligate with an SR rating of 9. It is very stable, but a single species is never a safe situation in nature. These cypress trees need some woody understory and some herbaceous cover to support them. Many of the plants shown in these images are palatable grazing and browsing species, yet there are no signs that vigor is impaired by humans or animals. Some of these locations are used for occasional livestock grazing, but with proper management, riparian plant vigor has been maintained. So are plants healthy? Are they vigorous? And why is this important? Riparian plants that are browsed, mowed, or grazed short continuously can become unhealthy. Unhealthy plants can be compromised and have compromised root systems that may not be able to provide energy dissipation and bank stabilizing functions. If vigor is compromised, then it is time to do something different, such as removing the hindrances that are causing the problems. So how can you see it? Look for plants that have their leaves intact. Over time, heavy browsing, grazing, and mowing that cut the leaves and stems can cause them to develop scabs and stunted or scarred appearances. Once you have trained your eye to see stunted plants or recognize the browse line, then you can easily spot this hindrance. This image shows a distinct browse line on riparian trees, which indicates a vigor problem. While these trees appear to be healthy when their trunks are exposed from browsing, their flood resilience is weakened. Bushy bluestem on the left and buttonbush bush above are both palatable browse plants and are showing signs of extreme overgrazing and or long-term browsing. Riparian grasses in this image are vigorous on one bank, yet the opposite bank is impaired by mowing and weed eating. So are there signs of water storage in banks and floodplains? And why is that important? Well, one of the important services maintained by riparian areas is the storage of water out of sight, below ground, or within the banks for release to the stream during dry times. Water storage capacity is influenced by the volume of organic matter within soils and can be indicated by the presence of water-loving plant species. A plant's wetland indicator status can tell you if the water is regularly present below the ground where it's growing. How can you see this? Use your field guide. Look for the obligate or OBL and facultative wet or FACW plants. This photo here indicates no or extremely poor water storage. Is there excessive bank or channel erosion? In this image, some erosion is visible, but not excessive. And why is this important? Erosion is a natural part of the riparian system, but like most things in nature, balance is needed. Erosion of stream banks should be compensated by deposition and the creation and maintenance of meander bins. Meander bins can aid in energy dissipation within a channel. The more crooked a stream becomes, the lower the gradient or the flatter the slope. And how can you see it? Look for signs of a bank or channel erosion. Is it in predictable locations or on meander bends where point bars are being formed with the eroded materials just downstream? Does the channel look downcut or incised like a drainage ditch? And if so, it may also lack an active floodplain. This is how an out-of-balance erosion looks. Is sediment being deposited in a balanced way? In this photo, the answer is yes. Why is this important? A river moves and processes both sediment and water, and they must be in balance. If too much sediment is being delivered to the channel and there is not enough water energy to process it, sediment can build up in the middle of the channel and other illogical places. When water and sediment are in balance, sediments are deposited on point bars and contribute to the natural meander pattern of a waterway. Just recall the principles of Lane's balance on page 8 of your remarkable riparian field guide. So how can you see this? If heaps and piles of sediment build up in the channel, or if mounds of sediment are being trapped behind a structure with unnatural erosion below, then these are signs that sediment is not being processed and the stream is not in balance. These images show heaps and mounds of sediments in illogical places. This is a riparian site along the South Llano River in Kimball County. 10 years ago, the site was a large, naked gravel bar, but it is recovering nicely and slow now. The wide, well-vegetated floodplain has caught enough fine sediment to sustain good plant growth. Baccharis is the plant that kicked off the recovery, and now there is good diversity of plants with increased stability ratings. The site still lacks strong coverage of switchgrass, emery sedge, and eastern gamma grass, and while they are present, they are not yet dominant. Look closely and you can identify the distinct water storage zones by the plants growing here. The obligate plants are mostly at the water's edge, and the bushy blue stem of fac wet plant can be seen in the next zone. Facultative plants like baccharis and sycamore are seen higher up on the floodplain. This photo indicates a recovering gravel bar and a narrowing channel. Here is an observation of the same photo using the riparian bullseye evaluation. Note how the 10 indicators are assessed and marked appropriately on the target. First of all, the floodplain is clearly defined and accessible. If you look closely at it, you can see bits of flood debris. It's the inner zone, the bullseye. Only in some energy dissipation along the bank and in the channel, but abundant energy dissipation in the floodplain would be inner zone bullseye. Abundant colonization of fresh sediment like water willow and spike rush would be inner zone bullseye. With some gaps in coverage of stabilizing plant communities, which are not well enough established yet, would be the mid-zone at risk. Abundant reproduction of woody plants like baccharis and sycamore, or grasses and sedges like spike rush and bushy bluestem would be the inner zone or bullseye. Modest diversity of woody plants like baccharis, sycamore, buttonbush, etc., and modest diversity of grasses and sedges, which only 4 are visible, would add up to a mid-zone at risk. Woody plant vigor not readily apparent in the photo, but herbaceous plant vigor appears healthy and vigorous, would be an inner zone bullseye. Obligate and facultative wet species, indicating water storage, are abundant near the water's edge but not further back, which means mid-zone at risk. With no excessive bank erosion visible in this photo, we're hitting a bullseye, the inner zone. And sediment appears normal and balanced in this photo, so that also would be bullseye, inner zone. For riparian function and water quality connections, the quality of water in our rivers and streams can be influenced either positively by healthy riparian function or negatively by the presence of one or more hindrances. The information here explains how 7 common water quality parameters are connected to good riparian function. With bacteria, E. coli is a type of bacteria found in the large intestines of warm-blooded water animals that can cause severe illness to humans if ingested. E. coli is an indicator that disease-causing organisms may be present in the water. When rainfall runs off over the land, it can carry bacteria into streams. Riparian vegetation can slow and filter runoff water before it reaches a stream, causing sediment with bacteria particles attached to settle out and be deposited on the banks. Microorganisms in riparian soil can destroy harmful bacteria as a part of the soil food web. Second, you have total suspended solids, or TSS. These are a measure of materials or particles, like soil and minerals, that are suspended in the water and can be trapped by a filter. Riparian vegetation helps to slow runoff and allows for solids to settle out before entering the stream. Third are dissolved oxygen, or DO. These are very vital to almost all aquatic life. Oxygen levels in water vary throughout the day and the seasons and are determined by many factors such as temperature, flow, aquatic plants, dissolved or suspended solids, altitude, and human activities. Riparian vegetation helps to maintain healthy oxygen levels needed for aquatic life. Fourth is temperature. Temperature is the controlling factor for the life cycle of aquatic life. It is influenced by the time of day, seasonal shade, water depth, flow rate, and altitude. Riparian vegetation, especially tall trees, can help to shade streams and to regulate fluctuations in water temperature so to maintain healthy fish habitat. Narrow meandering channels don't get as hot or cold as shallow, flat, and straightened ones. Sixth is clarity. Clarity of water is a measure of how far light can travel through it. The clearer the water, the farther the light can travel, promoting photosynthesis and aquatic plant growth. Clarity can be degraded by the presence of fine sediment within the stream channel. Good riparian vegetation can help to trap and stabilize fine sediment before they enter a stream. And last is flow. Flow is often expressed in cubic feet per second, or CFS, and is a measurement of the velocity of surface water as it travels across the landscape. Soils, aquatic plants, and tree roots can affect flow rates and contribute to recharge when they capture floodwater and hold it in place for slow release, thus helping maintain flow during dry times. Today's lesson on learning to see the bullseye gives us a meaning of evaluating a riparian site for key functional indicators. For homework, revisit your site and complete the bullseye evaluation target. You can find the target and instructions for its completion in your remarkable riparian field guide.